And next up we have Mind Games, a LitRPG Apocalypse, RealRPG book number 1, with this written by Mark Whipple. It is 323 pages. It is $3.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. 8 internet friends have an IRL meeting in a mountain cabin, but instead of the long weekend get-together they planned, they are suddenly caught up in the end of the world as they knew it. They just met up for the first time in real life last night, and today's group wake-up call is a strange message floating in the air telling them that something called a system start has just happened. Now, magic works and technology doesn't. Cell phones won't work, cars won't start, and it's 10 miles to the nearest town. Some of them have families to worry about. Some of them don't even believe this is real. And all of them have secrets they have to overcome if they're going to work together and make it back to town alive. On the way, they'll meet other survivors, also confused, scared, and questioning what's happening. 10 miles doesn't seem that far, but by the end of it, they will have faced some of the worst that the system can throw at them. And then, things get really interesting. The small Tennessee town they're trying to reach is isolated, cut off, and surrounded by a new and terrifying world. Outside the town, ordinary creatures are becoming things out of nightmare, and inside the town, legends are coming to life. There we go. That's a novel description. It's a little long, and I think it gives away a little bit too much of the story, but still, it is accurate. This is an RPG apocalypse story that does a really good job of hitting all the right notes for this subgenre. And again, if you don't know what RPG apocalypse story it is, apocalypse, like a zombie apocalypse or a viral apocalypse, it just has like this RPG theme where people get system notifications and RPG-ish kind of system. And I think this story actually tackles the apocalypse part fairly well. It's not as dark as some other stories, so I might really not satisfy the people who love grim, dark apocalypse stories. And while I think it does convey an appropriate sense of danger, not only because of the monsters that appear in the story, but also because of the threat of other people. People are jerks. People are prone to violence. And in a situation where there's apocalypse, people are likely to abuse their powers or use them maliciously, or just kind of give in to the evil that is in them. And I think the story does a good job of hinting at some of those things, but not actually fleshing them out a lot. And maybe that's something the author is saving for another book. But on the whole, that aspect of it is kind of limited to a couple of jerks who were just trying to murder them for being murder hobos. But nothing like too much darker than that. There are also natural conflict points of like limited food systems, no water, no electricity from like the natural city resources, plus all the roaming monsters, of course. So that apocalypse is done fairly well. On the RPG side of things, LitRPG side of things, the game mechanics felt really solid. Like there's a lot of notifications. They're familiar systems, levels, XP, stats, classes, etc. There is a unique character class for the main character and some of the other characters in his group, but this is going to be the unique one, Mind Mage, or in this case, I think it's called a Mesmerizer character class, which is kind of this psychic character class, which fits into the theme of the initial group of people meeting in real life for the first time, which I'm not necessarily going to spoil it for you. But I was surprised at how little that mental mage system was used in the first half of the story. It's not really used until like the second half when they get to town, which is not spoiled because it's in the novel description. But once it does use it, becomes like a regular feature of like, oh, he's using it for good. He's not using it to corrupt or in a pervy way necessarily. But the use of that particular system was very well thought in its consequences and its limitations, and in its potential applications. And I liked that particular class system as feeling unique and giving this story kind of this freshness as far as like this mage character class goes. Other reviewers have noted it felt a little pervy, and potentially can because of what that initial group is doing as content. We'll get into that in a little second. The action in the story, good. Lots of good action here. But the thing that I think I enjoyed the most about the story is definitely the character development and the character progression on a social level in the story. The main character, the author actually brings a lot of these characters to life. They're not one-dimensional. They all have interesting personalities, flawed personalities, so nobody's perfect. Nobody knows everything. And there are internal conflicts within the group, which are, to me at least, healthily discussed and talked out and worked around. So I liked that social progression and character development in the story. I think that there is a good bit of talking and dialogue that brings these characters and gives them each a personality, which is good for me. I will point out a few things that were bothered by other reviewers. They weren't big deal to me, but like there are things you should know if you're deciding to read this or not. One, there are unconventional relationships in the story, including the starting group uses hypnotism for adult fun among consenting adults. It is there. There is also a I forget what the exact word, a dom sub relationship. Was it dominant and submissive? I can't remember what the exact terms are. But there's that kind of relationship. Again, it's among consenting adults. There is no sex in the story, no graphic sex. There was some implied sex saying, oh, those two probably hooked up before the story occurred or something. Or like people going off into together and coming back like, your clothes seem a little ruffled. You got some big smiles on your faces. But nothing graphic beyond those inferences. There are sex jokes in the story. It's part of its humor. And there are inferences that people have been intimate as part of their relationships. And if that bothers you, letting you know now. Another review criticism from other reviews are essentially been the locations chosen for the story doesn't feel like it is reflective of the people who have actually lived there. I think it's called Pigeon Forward, and apparently it's a huge tourist town, and that is not really reflected, according to people who live there, accurate enough, including like the attitude of locals for an apocalypse type situation. I can't comment on that. It didn't bother me because I've never lived there. But that always occurs whenever you use a real place in your story. That's why I tend to personally just use made up locations where people can't criticize like, oh, I've lived there and that's not what it's like, 1 star or 2 stars, whatever. So it's a thing, but those are probably some of the recurring things I've seen people talk about. For me, I didn't really care. I like interesting situations like that. I like interesting relation dynamics. It's as fascinating as a good monster fight or something. For me, it's a really good story, and it only kind of got better as the story unfolded. So for me, it gets a score of 7.7 out of 10. That's Mind Games, a LitRPG apocalypse story, with a score of 7.7 out of 10.